What if I told you that a year from now you could walk past your reflection and not even recognize the man staring back? A man no longer driven by fear, no longer ruled by excuses, no longer held captive by delay, but a man of force, of fire, of absolute command. Listen to me now. This is not inspiration. This is reconstruction. And if you have the courage to finish what we start here today, then the man you were will not survive it. The world will see a new creature, a man reborn by vow, by fire, and by relentless decision. So stay with me, and together we will kill the old you. There comes a time in the life of every man when he must face a silent reckoning. It is not a moment announced by trumpets, nor does it arrive with ceremony. It is quiet, eerily so. A stillness that settles upon him when he looks in the mirror and cannot find himself. Not truly. He sees a face familiar in structure but vacant in spirit. A man who once dreamed, now dulled. A man who once desired, now delayed. A man who once declared war on his limitations, now whispers apologies to them. That moment, that great and solemn hour, marks the beginning of transformation. But let me be unmistakably clear. Before a man may rise, he must first die. I do not speak of the body, no, I speak of the self, the worn identity you have carried like a coat, stitched by teachers who did not understand power, by parents who feared too much, by friends who praised your comfort more than your calling. This self must perish, not with sorrow, but with intent, not with mourning, but with command. Excuses as the armor of the fading man. You may recognize him by the way he speaks. I'll start when the timing is right. I'm not ready yet. I'm waiting for clarity, for energy, for permission. These are not delays. These are funeral hymns. They are the lullabies sung by men who have allowed their potential to rot beneath the surface of their delay. Excuses are not shields. They are chains. Chains forged by indecision and polished with false logic. Every time you say, I can't, what you truly mean is, I won't. And every I won't is a quiet declaration of allegiance to the old self, the version of you that must now be eradicated if you are to become anything of force. Most men do not live 70 years. They live 1 year 70 times. They carry the same thoughts, the same fears, the same voice in their head that said, maybe tomorrow, for decades. They decorate that voice with new clothes, new surroundings, new distractions, but the man within remains unchanged. He ages, but he does not evolve. He adds responsibilities, but not power. He gains opinions, but not clarity. He becomes busier, but not better. This is not life. This is a slow procession toward regret. And regret is the graveyard of the powerful. It is the echo chamber of the man who almost became. When you begin to awaken, the mirror becomes a weapon. You no longer see the same reflection. The old face becomes a stranger. You are not proud of him, nor do you hate him. You simply know he cannot survive the next season of your life. You begin to speak to yourself differently, not in soft tones of self-soothing, but in declarations of departure. This is no longer who I am. This identity does not match my destiny. This reflection is expired. And that, my dear reader, is when the death begins. Because the most powerful change does not begin with a new tactic, a new book, or a new strategy. It begins with the funeral of the man you were never meant to remain. You must burn the old blueprint. Write this down and never forget it. You will not become a new man by stacking new habits atop an old identity. You must destroy the structure, your beliefs about your capabilities, your assumed limitations, your rituals of procrastination, your internal permission slips for delay, your hidden worship of comfort. All of it must go. Do not tidy it, do not fold it, do not explain it. Burn it. The man you once were was not born to last. He was born to bring you here, but he has no place in the next chapter. You do not renovate identity. You replace it. Consider now the great Abraham Lincoln, a man carved not from luxury, but from loss, from failure, from pressure that would have drowned weaker souls. Do you suppose the man who presided over a broken nation was the same man who suffered political defeat after defeat? who buried his beloved, who endured the weight of melancholy, who questioned his own worth in private solitude? Number. He was not the same man. Lincoln shed his skin. Each sorrow cut him. Each failure refined him. Each sleepless night made the fire burn deeper. He could have hidden, he could have excused his past, but instead, he allowed it to kill the version of himself that would not have survived the mission ahead. The Lincoln who carried the nation through war was not born by fortune. He was born by death, the death of his excuses, the death of his softer self. And so must you die. The pressure that you feel now, the dissatisfaction, the hunger, the frustration, is not the enemy. It is the invitation. It is the signal that you are ready to burn the bridge to your past self. And if you are not ready to burn that bridge, I tell you this: you are not ready for greatness. Now repeat after me, not once, but until your voice begins to shake the chains of your conditioning. I am the type of man who no longer asks for permission to transform. I am the type of man who burns excuses before they burn opportunity. I am the type of man who buries hesitation and walks forward anyway. I am the type of man who kills delay before delay kills destiny. I am the type of man who no longer identifies with who he was, but who he is becoming. Speak these aloud, not as poetry, not as theory, but as command, because you must understand this moment is not ceremonial. It is mechanical. You are pulling the lever that initiates the death of the man you were trained to be and the birth of the man you were born to become. There is no turning back after this, and that is the beauty of it. In this place, there is no need for motivation, only momentum. And momentum is not granted, it is claimed, so take your vow now, out loud, with fire, with power, with no retreat. I do not wish to change, I command it. I do not hope to evolve, I demand it. I no longer carry the man I was, I bury him today. And now we begin, not with tips, not with tricks, but with transformation. The old self is dead. Let us now proceed to build the one who will never be buried again. There exists a war more dangerous than any fought with gunpowder or steel, and it is waged not in the trenches of the earth, but within the 4 inches between a man's ears. It is a war of thought, of direction, of mental command, and most men, without ever realizing it, lose this war before they've even recognized it has begun. The tragedy is not in the defeat. It is in the ignorance. For while they assume their thoughts are their own, they fail to see that their minds have become occupied territory, not governed by purpose, but possessed by noise, fear, delay, and distraction. The mind, when left untrained, does not serve the man. It rules him. And worse, it does not rule with vision or discipline, but with suggestion and impulse, shaped by the environment, by the unspoken expectations of mediocre companions, by the voices of those who never built anything but limitations. The untrained mind is a magnet for drift, a sponge for confusion. It allows every passing opinion to enter, every idle emotion to dictate the course of the day, every childhood pattern to whisper, "This is who you are," even when you know in your bones you were born for more. Thought, my friend, is not neutral. It either builds your life or betrays it. There is a force, ancient and silent, which I have studied and named hypnotic rhythm. It is not a curse or a superstition. It is law. It is the invisible current that pulls a man into sameness, into comfort, into smallness, without ever raising its voice. It does not strike in sudden blows. No, it operates in the daily repetition of insignificant thoughts that, over time, become identity. Hypnotic rhythm is the slow erosion of possibility by the steady trickle of mediocrity. It is the law that says, if you do not decide your dominant thoughts, they will be decided for you. And those thoughts, once repeated often enough, will wrap around you like a vine, gentle at first, then binding, then suffocating. This is why the battle must be fought not once, but daily, not occasionally, but continually, and not with reaction, but with command. The man who masters his thoughts masters his world, for the outer world is but a reflection of the inner. Let no man deceive himself into believing that his outer struggles are separate from his inner passivity. You must choose now and forever to become the architect of your mind. That means choosing your dominant thought each day before the world has a chance to hand you one. That means repeating what you have chosen aloud, not weakly, not theoretically, but with emotional intensity, until the subconscious accepts it as law. For the subconscious does not respond to information, it responds to emotion, repetition, and clarity. Consider Thomas Edison, not merely the inventor of the electric light, but the conqueror of inner darkness. When the world declared that what he envisioned was impossible, he did not debate them. He did not ask for permission. He burned with obsession. He held his mental picture with such unshakable precision that it became more real to him than the absence of evidence. Edison's secret was not in his laboratories, it was in his mental dominance. He refused to think thoughts that were not aligned with his vision. He refused to allow his internal world to be dictated by external opinions. His thoughts were not reactive, they were designed. He thought with precision. He imagined with authority. He directed the currents of his subconscious like a general leads an army. And because of this, the universe bent to his certainty. Henry Ford, too, understood this principle and lived by it. When critics mocked him, when bankers doubted him, when his own engineers told him a V8 engine in a single block could not be done, he replied, "Produce it anyway." And why? Because Ford had long since decided who he was. He did not allow others to install limits in his mind. He did not receive his beliefs from the crowd. He chose them, deliberately, relentlessly. Ford did not hope to become powerful. He believed he already was. And belief, when repeated with emotion and paired with consistent action, becomes reality. Now I must speak to you directly, and I ask you to listen not as a man who needs more information, but as a man who is ready to finally take the reins of his mind. From this day forward, you do not allow your thoughts to wander without leash or consequence. You do not permit old patterns to repeat themselves without challenge. You become the director of your mental stage. And when doubt arrives, as it surely will, you do not cower. You confront it with command. Speak now these affirmations aloud, not timidly, not once, but as a hammer strikes steel again and again, until the sound of truth becomes louder than the noise of memory. I am the type of man who commands his thoughts before the world can influence them. I am the type of man who chooses clarity over confusion, certainty over hesitation. I am the type of man who builds his future with the bricks of intentional thought. I am the type of man who recognizes the whispers of drift and replaces them with the voice of design. I am the type of man who trains his mind daily and permits no intruder to reside within it. Understand this. You cannot expect to become powerful while allowing weak thoughts to roam freely through your mind. You cannot become decisive while rehearsing confusion. You cannot rise while repeating the inner vocabulary of a man who crawls. And so you must speak differently. Each day you will rise and decide what you will think. You will not wait for emotion. You will lead it. You will repeat your chief aim with fire. You will speak your identity aloud until your body begins to move in alignment with it. You will not wait for belief. You will create it. This is the war of thought. And it is won not with battles, but with repetition. Repeat these final commands and let them be the scaffolding upon which your new self is built. My mind is not a sponge, it is a sword. I do not entertain thoughts that betray my vision. I design my mental state like a craftsman builds a cathedral. I am the type of man who installs power into his mind through repetition. I do not drift, I direct. This is how you win the war, not once, not occasionally, daily. There comes a moment in the life of every man where motion must give way to meaning, where effort must be replaced with finality, and where a single, irrevocable decision becomes the foundation upon which an entirely new life is built. Until this moment arrives, a man may try, he may wish, he may even act, but his transformation will remain unfinished. Why? Because he has not yet decided with enough sacred force to change his very nature. For transformation, my friend, is not a result of trying harder. It is the result of deciding deeper. Do not be deceived. Excuses are not reasons. They are symptoms. They are the native language of the man who has not yet decided. The man who has truly decided no longer requires explanation, no longer seeks consensus, no longer calculates the emotional cost of commitment. He simply moves because he no longer needs to consider the alternative. The man who still needs encouragement is not yet committed. The man who still seeks motivation has not yet made the final vow. You see, true decision does not leave room for options. It cuts off all escape. It removes the exit. And in doing so, it creates a new self. This is the error most men make. They confuse preference with decision. I'd like to be wealthy. I'd prefer to be strong. I hope to be consistent. These are not decisions. These are daydreams dressed in polite language. Real decision does not leave the door open. It seals it shut, nails it closed, and burns the key. The man who makes such a decision is not interested in appearing committed. He is committed even in solitude, even in obscurity, even in resistance. He no longer negotiates with his feelings, for his future has already been declared. The man who waits for certainty will never command it. He will be ruled forever by those who chose earlier and believed harder. The man who delays until he feels ready will be outpaced by the one who decided to become ready. For life does not favor the hesitant, it obeys the decided. And the moment you draw a line in your spirit, the moment you speak your vow aloud with such finality that your body aligns with your voice, that is when you begin to change. Andrew Carnegie, whom I studied for many years, did not ascend to the heights of industry by accident, and certainly not by ease. His rise began not with strategy, but with decision. A decision not only to dominate steel, but to build an empire for the benefit of mankind. He made the unshakable choice to become the wealthiest man in the world, not for vanity, but for purpose, and to give that wealth away to fuel progress, education, and peace. That was not a dream, it was a command. He chose the outcome, and then he became the man capable of fulfilling it. Do you understand? The result followed the decision, not the reverse. And what of Charles M. Schwab, Carnegie's right hand and eventual president of U.S. Steel? Schwab did not rise because he was the most experienced. He rose because he carried the decision to align with excellence. He did not need to be reminded to pursue greatness. He had already adopted it as his standard. In rooms where others felt inferior, Schwab stood with calm authority. Not because he was arrogant, but because he had already decided who he was. His behavior obeyed that decision, and so did his results. This is your hour to do the same. You must speak your decision aloud, clearly, and with such conviction that your past identity feels it like a funeral bell. The man you once were must die, not in sorrow, but in honor, for he carried you to this line. But he cannot cross it. The decision to transform is not an emotional high. It is the execution of a vow. And it must be made as if your life depends on it, because in truth it does. Not the survival of your body, but the birth of your becoming, the death of the excuse maker, the birth of the man who is no longer available for excuse. Speak now and say it like law. I am the type of man who has already decided. I am the type of man who no longer asks permission to evolve. I am the type of man who follows through on his vision with unbreakable finality. I am the type of man whose choices are not governed by mood, but by mission. I am the type of man who finishes what he starts, especially when no one is watching. This is not a practice in motivation. This is the signing of a contract, not on paper, but in spirit. And once it is signed, you no longer return to the language of delay. You no longer explain your inconsistency. You no longer need inspiration to act. You have decided, and now the world must bend. You may wonder, but Hill, what if I decide and I still feel doubt? And to that I say, you will. But that does not matter. The final decision does not erase fear, it outranks it. The man who has truly decided walks forward even as fear screams. Because fear has no voice where finality resides. And decision, when spoken with certainty and repeated with fire, becomes a greater force than hesitation ever could be. You must burn the old strategy of waiting to feel ready. You must now install the new belief, I am ready because I decided to be. This belief, when repeated aloud and paired with action, will begin to overwrite the old operating system, the one that delayed, explained, and wandered. Let today be the day you override it once and for all. Write down your vow. Speak it aloud until the words become instinct. And remember, a man is not known by what he hopes for. He is known by what he chooses without retreat. Let us conclude this part with your non-negotiable affirmations. Speak them now. Repeat them morning and night. Let them become your new law. I am the type of man who makes unshakable decisions. I do not require proof before I act. I act because I have decided. I am the type of man who removes escape routes and burns every bridge to hesitation. My decision is done. My vow is sacred. My actions obey the man I have already chosen to become. I am no longer the man who delays. I am the man who decides and dominates. And with that, the old voice fades. The decision stands, and the transformation begins. It is a bitter truth, but a necessary one. Most men do not fail because they are weak. They fail because their environment allows them to. The circle they move in, the voices they hear daily, the standards that surround them, the unspoken agreements in their homes and workplaces permits their mediocrity. And permission, when offered long enough, becomes identity. A man begins to believe that his half-effort is acceptable, that his delay is reasonable, that drifting, so long as it is disguised in busyness or politeness, is not truly failure. But let me tell you now, it is. Drift tolerated is destiny denied. You see, the enemy of your future is not always loud. He does not always wear horns or hurl insults. Often, he sits beside you at lunch. He smiles politely when you say you're still figuring it out. He nods gently when you say you'll begin tomorrow. He laughs softly when you speak of your vision as if it were just a dream. He does not resist you, he accepts you just as you are. And that, my friend, is how drift survives. It feeds not on resistance, but on quiet tolerance. A man's environment is not neutral. It is either fueling his fire or extinguishing it. Every conversation, every room, every repeated interaction is either sharpening you or softening you. And if you do not guard your gates with unflinching clarity, your mission will be reduced, not by direct attack, but by subtle erosion. Your standards will be diluted. Your focus will be scattered. Your vision will begin to blur. And before long, you will find yourself standing in a room full of people who no longer remind you of where you're going, but only reflect who you used to be. Let me be perfectly clear. You cannot transform while maintaining relationships that serve your former self. You cannot build a new future while still dining with the ghosts of your past. You must sever ties, not in bitterness, not in hatred, but in finality. You must cut off the voices that pacify your mediocrity, even if they are kind, even if they mean well. Because the most dangerous comfort is not the kind found in luxury, but the kind found in familiarity. The room that knows your name, but not your destiny. The friend who remembers your smile, but not your vow. The counsel you receive daily, whether explicit or implied, shapes your subconscious. It whispers when you are unsure. It echoes in the back of your mind when you hesitate. It becomes the default temperature of your decisions. And if your circle does not breathe fire into your focus, you will begin to match their climate. A man may say he is building greatness, but if he lives in the house of average, he will soon speak its language. That is why you must design your environment like an architect designs a fortress, with intention. with standards, with gates that do not open to everyone. Your environment must become a forge, not a lounge, a place that disciplines you into greatness, not comforts you into complacency. Let us speak of the mastermind. In all of my studies of the most successful men in history, I found this constant. They did not rise alone. While their initial vision may have been formed in solitude, their execution was strengthened by strategic alliance. Carnegie had Schwab, Ford had Edison. These men did not stumble into greatness. They surrounded themselves with others who demanded it. Their masterminds were not